Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable or sellable business value, and then planning for your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's transferable and then exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. If you've listened in at all before, you've heard us say over and over, it can take years to implement a comprehensive or holistic plan for a successful exit. If for no other reason, it takes time, resources, and a lot of intentionality and planning to build a business that is actually transferable. And another good reason to start planning early, and something that we always have in view when we're working with clients and planning comprehensively, is to make sure you have a well thought out plan for life after the business, because most owners, statistics show this, that most owners who exit are unhappy within 2 years of leaving because they don't have a clear plan as to how they're going to find purpose, meaning, and significance after the business. That same purpose, meaning, and significance that they experience as an owner of a business. So this is a topic that we raise regularly and will continue to, because it's so important. And today we're going to discuss this again, and specifically the title of the topic today is the 5 capitals and life after the business. And the speaker, I'm going to have the speaker here, our guest speaker here with us this morning, of course, describe what the 5 capitals are, and we'll talk about that. Our guest today is Cory Carlson, excuse me, Cory Carlson, who is an author, speaker, podcast host, and coach. As an entrepreneur, former executive, husband, father of 3, Cory absolutely understands the pressures working parents face. And as a result, he's developed a passion for helping business leaders realize success at work and at home. During his 20 years in corporate America, when Cory was working his way up through the executive ladder and level, he witnessed brokenness, not infrequently, that looked like this. It looked like work without purpose, burnout, lack of focus, strained marriages, absentee parents. He especially noticed that business leaders, not a few business leaders, were not living life to the fullest. And so there was a point in his corporate journey that he discovered coaching, and it helped him become a better leader, better husband and father. So he left his corporate career to help other leaders win at work and at home through executive coaching, speaking, writing. He published his first book in June 2019 titled Win at Home First. Here it is right here. Got a copy. Just picked it up yesterday. And he just released the second book, Rise and Go. He also hosts a leadership podcast titled Win at Home First. And so we're excited to have him with us this morning. Cory, good morning. Thanks for joining us from Cincinnati. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Pat and Walter. Thank you very much for having me on the podcast and share some of this content as we help basically retirees get ready to prepare for that next step.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, that's certainly going to be fit right in with what Pat and I are, try to accomplish every couple of weeks when we get together and do the podcast. So, Cory, maybe the best place to start, can you describe the 5 capitals?
Yes, I absolutely. So just to give a little context of the 5 capitals, how I got exposed to it is I was in corporate America and a little bit in over my head. I was VP of a $120 million division at the time and just kind of need some help. I was finding myself taking my identity to work. I was skipping the gym, skipping quiet time. And I remember different times, my kids, I have 3 kids playing on the ground and I wasn't necessarily engaged with them because I had my laptop on my lap just working. And I was like, this is not sustainable. I need to find a better way. So I reached out to my boss, who I really enjoyed. I told him what was going on, that I was a little bit in over my head, managing people older than me. I leapfrogged my boss. I was now managing him, and I just didn't think this would be sustainable. And as we talked, he said, get an executive coach. I've always had one. I hired an executive coach, and it changed my life. I know that sounds extreme, but it did change my life, just because I learned, well, one, I do it now for a living, but also it changed my life because I got a different perspective on life. And one of those perspectives was this 5 capitals framework that the executive coach that I had, he helped create. His name's Brandon. He helped create these 5 capitals. And I just started using them in my own life, as well as those that I led, and started to see a difference in them. Therefore, I was like, I want to go do this. And so the 5 capitals is a simple yet profound framework. And the first one is spiritual capital. And if you're a listener, no matter what your spiritual beliefs are, whether you believe in God or you believe in, the universe or astrology or just quiet time, it's this idea of spiritual is just that there's something bigger than just us. And so it's to slow down, it's to pray, it's to meditate, and it's to figure out how do we get more of that white space in our life. And so by having more spiritual capital, that's where we gain wisdom. That's where we're able to discern next steps. It's where we find out our purpose. And so that's spiritual capital. Second one is relational. So if that first one is all about our why, then the relational is about the who in our life. That's our spouse, our kids, our good friends. And as business leaders, that's usually something that starts to fall off, is we may not have a lot of friends because we're busy at work, and then on the weekends we're trying to be super parent, super spouse, and so maybe friends lose out in it. So that's relational capital. The third one's physical capital, which is all about time and energy. How are you managing your calendar? Are you managing your calendar, or is it controlling you? What time are you going to bed? What time are you waking up? Are you getting to the gym? What are you putting in your body? The fourth one is intellectual capital, which is about insights and ideas. How are you remaining sharp? What are you learning? What are you teaching to others? Being more of that river versus a reservoir. And so that's intellectual capital. And then the last one's financial capital. It's dollars and cents. But it's not just about how much money we make. It's how are we stewarding the money? Are we being generous with it, from tithing to donating nonprofits? Also, are we leveraging it for those higher capitals? Those capitals have kind of a rank to them. So are we spending money on things that will allow us to do more of those above capitals? For example, the listener that may in fact have young kids, are you spending money to get a babysitter so that you can go on a date? Or for the older, more senior listener, are you spending money to go on vacation with your loved ones? Taking time off. And so those are the idea with the 5 capitals, as that framework is. And as I started to lead my own life on that, using that as a filter to make decisions, I started to do weekly and annual planning with it. I started to see a shift in how I really kind of not only attack my day, but attack my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then when we're working with a business owner, Cory, and we engage, and we're answering 3 questions right out the gate. When do you want to leave the business? Number 2 is, do you have any idea who you want to transfer or sell the business to? And number 3, these are universal foundational questions that every business owner is going to have to ask themselves at one point or another. And then the third one is the financial capital question here is how much are you going to need to do everything you want to do after you leave? And is there any kind of gap that needs to be made up? And so those are foundational questions that are being asked, but we're also, it's much expanded into, of course, in all of those different areas, very technical stuff as to how to make an exit happen for a third-party sale or sale to insiders or kids or whatever. But along the way too, we're asking a lot of questions about okay, what are you going to do next? Because as this business owner, be it 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, whatever, you've experienced a lot of significance. You've made a massive difference in a lot of lives. Your family has been provided for, your employees, your customers, your vendors, suppliers, the community, you're generous. And you've realized a lot of purpose, meaning, and significance that you may not even fully understand until you're gone. So let's start now putting pieces together to create a plan, a strategy, if you will, once you're gone, to replace that meaning, purpose, and significance. And I like your framework here because it hits all the different categories, I think. Oftentimes during the building phase, if they're successful, it's not unusual for some of these categories to be neglected. And you just mentioned some from your own experience: relational, physical, you weren't getting to the gym, you had a laptop. So for listeners who are planning to leave, how would you see practically how to apply or to think through the 5 capitals in creating their plan for after the business?
Yeah, using the 5 capitals and actually assigning some P words to it just to help. We found that when we go into companies and share this information, sometimes just having these 5 P words is will helpful. So I'll weave those in as we talk, but also just some questions. And I think for that listener, it's kind of on a scale from 1 to 10. Where are you at on this? And the first one would be purpose. Is before retirement, people's purpose a lot of times is found in leading the company, being the business owner, and that becomes their purpose. It dangerously can also become their identity. And so when it is gone, they question, who are they, which factors into a lot of things that can happen in retirement where people get depressed or they just start watching TV. They've lost their way. They don't know their purpose. And so, a question for that listener to think about is, do you know what you're moving towards? What's your purpose going to be about in your retirement years? What are you being called to? Are you being called to help with nonprofits? You can be a consultant. Are you just going to be an incredible parent and grandparent, incredible friend? But really to think through, what is that purpose?
Yeah, that's good because what we have found is, I like the way you use moving toward, because what we have found is there's pushes and pulls we categorize them as pushes and pulls, reasons that an owner's leaving. They may be pushed out because of health reasons, family health reasons, or the economy has just wrecked their business, whatever. So they're being pushed out. We find that the ones that end up being happier after they leave are the ones that have moved toward something with purpose or being pulled out of the business to something that has purpose and meaning.
Yeah, there's a book called Fathered by God by a guy named John Eldredge. And it talks about the 5 different stages. It's about men, but it would apply to women as well. But the 5 stages that you go from boy to cowboy to warrior to lover to king to sage. Actually, I think maybe boy's not it. I think I may have gave 6. But those are the one. But the point of it, one he talks about, is that all these different phases that we have throughout our life. And if we kind of skip a piece, we may go back to that in later years, which sometimes can be a midlife crisis or something. But the thing that he mentioned in the book, he talks about that last stage, the sage, which usually hits about retirement. But he kind of calls out 2 different pieces in there. One is many sages, they pack up and they retire and they move to Florida, is the example he gives in there. And so they may not be living into any purpose of investing into others, consulting, discipling others, developing others, because they've just packed up and moved to Florida or wherever the case may be. And so he kind of talks a little bit on that could be a miss on sages if they just don't think about what their purpose could be. Not that there's anything wrong with moving to different locations. You can still do things via Zoom, via phone calls, via some trips, via intentionality, whatever the case may be. But that's one call out. The other call out that he makes is sometimes the sages leave because no one else is reaching out to them. The younger generations don't reach out to them to seek help. And so it's kind of you mentioned push and pulls. There's this both and where the sages need to think about what that purpose is. How could they invest in others? But also the others who aren't sages, we need to be reaching out to them as opposed to just Googling our answers or, just talking to our peers, but instead seeking wise counsel. And so for those that are retired and thinking through, hey, there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom you have to share. And so part of your purpose could be sharing that. What was it like as a parent, as a spouse, building a business, and to use that knowledge to help others?
Sure, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so purpose is one of the P's. What's another P?
The second P is people, right? So our second capital is relational capital. So this is about people. So for that retiree, who's the future tribe that you and your spouse are going to be spending time with? Who's going to be investing in you from a relational capital standpoint? Who are your peers going to be? And also, who are you going to be intentionally investing in? A little bit what we just talked about. And what can happen in this section or this idea of this P is a lot of people's friends are their coworkers.
Mhm.
And as they leave the business and as they leave the industry, if they're not careful, they're not going to be seeing their friends because they're not going to the office, not going to conferences, they're not going to meetings. And without intentionality going into retirement, they run the risk of never accidentally running into any of their friends anymore.
Right.
Because they don't go to the office, they don't go to the conference. And so as people are going into retirement, to really sit down and list out who are those people that we're going to hang out with, we're going to have over for dinner, we're going to play pickleball with, or, what any of those pieces as well. So that's more of a peer. Then to think through, hey, who's going to be pouring into you and keeping you sharp and keeping you wanting to grow and think about, and then a list of who are you going to be pouring into, who maybe it's your kids, grandkids, but maybe there's some younger people or people just not as far as long that you can invest in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the idea of people.
Okay, how about the third P?
The third is about pace. Third capital is physical capital. So this is all about pace. What are you and your spouse? What are the healthy rhythms, the predictable patterns that you guys are going to have as you move into retirement?
Mm-hmm.
Having each day with some purpose instead of just kind of winging it, like, oh, we'll kind of get up whenever we want, or we'll kind of nap whenever we want, or go to, if there's no intentionality on it, the days will kind of maybe just become mundane and boring. But to think through, hey, these are the rhythms we want to see. These are maybe when we're doing our dates. These are when we're having guys' night or ladies' night. This is when we're going to go see all the kids, the grandkids, but really just kind of thinking through what are those healthy rhythms and predictable patterns that you want to have.
That's good.
From exercise to social time to, if we're not careful, Pat and Walter, what will happen is if we don't have a purpose, we don't have our people, the pace ends up being slow and watching a lot of TV.
Yeah.
I mean, the statistics on retirees, the amount of TV they watch, which probably could be switched to how much Facebook they look at or how many video games they play on their phone or iPad. If they're not careful, their pace could be one of sitting and just toggling their thumbs on technology.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's not a foreign concept. Actually seen it happen. Okay. Fourth P.
Fourth is perception. How do you perceive the future? During your whole career, you perceive the future as kind of up and to the right. It's going to be incredible. I'm going to grow. I'm going to learn. I'm going to continue sharpening the saw and getting better. But if we're not careful, when retirement happens, they almost could see that they could perceive the futures as one of decline. And so how are you growing? How are you learning? What are podcasts you're listening to, books you're reading? How are you going to remain innovative and successful in this next season?
Mhm.
And really having this growth mindset of there's some incredible years ahead.
Right. Yep. Okay.
And so
good.
the idea of perception is one of growth mindset, one of innovation, one of continuing to, basically sharpen the mental game and not just do crossword puzzles, but instead to learn and then quickly turn and share those learnings and findings with others.
Good perception. Okay. That was the 1, 2, 3, 4. That was the fourth P. Now
And
we're
the fifth one is financial capital, but the P becomes profits.
Mhm.
And so you guys do a very good job of setting them. That's one of your foundational questions you mentioned. How much will you need? And so it's very similar to what that would be. It's just thinking through the financial realities, both good and bad,
Mhm.
of what they will need in retirement. But it's also about leveraging the money they have for all the things all those P's that are above it. Not being afraid to spend money on traveling to see loved ones or see friends. Not being afraid to spend money on maybe even attending a conference, or going to a marriage retreat. But having money in a healthy place mentally so that you can leverage it for all the other capitals. And it's not one just about a scarcity mindset and kind of hoarding the money, afraid that it's not going to be around in the years to come.
So, Cory, let me ask you something, and feel free to say that's a really stupid question, and then Joe will just edit it out. But it just kind of, I was just following along. So very interesting. Really appreciate all your insights. But when you're in the workplace, you kind of have an external scorecard telling you if you're successful or not, because you're getting a paycheck, you're getting reviews at work, things like that. How do you, and I think that's important to get feedback as to, you're moving in the right direction, you're accomplishing what you set out. How do you do that once you no longer have a workplace environment? Do you come up with your own goals and then sit down on a regular basis and compare, and or what do you suggest there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me just tack something onto it. Our clients might be leaving with the ultimate scorecard. They might be leaving with this big financial payout because they've sold their business and financially scored big. So, yeah, great question. How would you answer, Walter?
Yeah. I want to answer this in two parts. The first part is for that person who's not just yet retired. Maybe they're getting close to their exit, their payday. But everything we tend to lean towards is a scorecard that's only on the business. And I want to challenge and encourage every listener to be thinking about scorecards that are about your personal life as well. It's not just about profit. It's not just about how much money's in the bank or what's the multiple, what's EBITDA that we're going to be selling the business for. But instead, there are KPIs. There's key performance indicators that you can start putting in your personal life before retirement.
Mm-hmm.
How many dates are you going on with your spouse a month? How many times are you getting together with your buddies a month? How many times you want to go golfing a month or play pickleball? How many annual guy trips, or ladies, for the ladies listening, trips do you want a year? How many times you want to see your kids? And just being very intentional and strategic. So often in business, we crush it. We got our vision statement. We understand our values for the business. This is our strategic plan. These are going to be our quarterly rocks. This is our 3-year and 5-year vision of where we're headed. But then when it comes to our personal life, we just wing it. We don't have vision statements. We have no idea any frequency or metrics we want to hit. We just wing it. We hope and pray that we get to the destination. If we're not careful, we may have a huge exit with our company, but there's a ton of shrapnel behind us. There's fractured relationships. There's lack of friends. There's no connection with kids. So I encourage every listener to think through, hey, what are those personal KPIs that you want to have? So that's part one. Part two is very similar, but it is to think through what would those KPIs look like? What is that scorecard in retirement? What do dates nights look like? How many do you want to go to? Getting together, how many times you want to get together with guys or the ladies, and just kind of thinking through what are some numbers. I know some individuals who are retirees now, and they're tracking how many people they're meeting with and discipling. Like they have a scorecard of how many individuals they're spending time with, and kind of thinking through what that looks like. Tracking how many times are they working out, trying to keep their body healthy. So those would be some ideas, Walter, to answer your question as far as let's create that scorecard. Like, what would successful retirement look like at a macro level? And then from a micro, it's all right. These are the things I would need to do in order to have that successful retirement.
Yeah. That's really, really helpful. And I think the other point, you've kind of built it in there, but I'll say it out loud, is if you have a spouse, you need to come up with these through discussions with your spouse. It's not like, hey, I've come up with this list, here it is.
100%. I mean, right? Because just like with employees, when you have there's voice in there, leads to buy-in. I mean, if our spouses can contribute to some of the ideas, or, that, hey, 4 times, that's not a great idea. Why don't you try 3 over here? But 4 is not a great idea. Why don't you try 5? I mean, it's just whatever that is, getting their input, they'll be bought into it. And I think as you do sit down with your spouse, it's what are your goals? What are their goals individually? And then what are the things you're going to do as a couple?
Yeah.
Because what we want to make sure both individuals in the marriage are thriving in the direction of retirement. We don't want one of the spouses out doing everything and pouring into other people, but yet the other one's sitting at home. So really talking about, hey, how do we attack retirement unified?
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I like this. I like this framework. I like that's the first time I've ever heard personal KPIs mentioned. And I like that terminology, and it absolutely aligns with what we're trying to encourage our clients to do in getting started sooner rather than later in planning for a successful exit. Because, as we often stress, it takes time to execute those business KPIs that's going to result in a transferable and more sellable, more valuable business. As much attention needs to be paid to the personal KPIs if indeed you want to have a truly successful exit and next chapter of life. To be as clear on what those KPIs are first on a personal level, and be as intentional about those, and maybe even more so, because actually at the end of the day, some of these things, relational comes to mind. At the end of it all, we always hear the story that someone on their deathbed they're talking about the relationships more than they're talking about anything that either they neglected or they're grateful for or whatever, rather than all of the material trappings and that they've accumulated through the years.
Absolutely. I mean, money doesn't bring happiness. And if someone is sitting on incredible financial capital in retirement, whether, they had that amazing exit at a high multiple and it's all good news, if they don't have any of the above capitals, it's going to be a lonely life. Yeah, your bank account may be fat, but everything else is just going to be kind of just lonely and sad.
Yeah. So listeners, purpose, people, pace, perception, and profits. Walter's going to close us out here in a second, Cory, but any last words of wisdom? Is there anything else, a point or two that we should have talked about that we didn't?
Yeah, I think anyone who hears this, it's not beat yourself up and, oh man, I've been a bad spouse, a bad parent, a bad whatever, because I've been so focused on the business. It's not too late. I mean, if you got a heartbeat and you're listening to this podcast, you can totally recalibrate, and you can totally make your next chapter, even your best chapter, where you can show up and be intentional as a spouse, as a parent, and as a leader in your community and in your company. And so hear this podcast, anything I've said, as an invitation to improve. And I know for me, I know these 5 capitals, but I get them screwed up. I'm human. I can do some things and get them lopsided. But the cool part about this framework is I know it and I can recalibrate and get my life back on track. I mean, last week, I coached my 10-year-old soccer team, and playing on Monday night, I always play with them because I used to play soccer. And so I love it, but I injured myself making some moves and hurt my back and had to see a chiropractor for the last week and a half. So my physical capital's way down. I haven't been to the gym like I want to. I haven't been running because I've been in pain. And when you don't exercise, you tend to eat a little extra cookies. You may, have an extra glass of wine at night because you aren't working out. However, I'm aware of it, and now my back's better and I'm recalibrating. I'm going to get my physical capital back in order. And so that's just the encouragement to those listeners is, hey, this is not like condemnation. This is instead encouragement and invitation to improve. And I've got these 5 P's in a worksheet. And if anyone wanted to see this worksheet or use it, you can email me at Cory, CORY, at CoryMCarlson.com. Be more than happy to email back and share what this worksheet is. And also, some of the content is in, I've written 2 books, and if a listener would like a book, love to give you a free book. And so that's CoryMCarlson.com/free book. You just pay shipping and handling, and you can have first book's called Win a Home First. Second book is Rise and Go, which is about resilience and hope. There you go. There's a copy of the book. But yeah, that would be the last thing I'd end, is just encourage the leaders just to, just kind of step into the recalibration.
Thanks, Cory. This has been really fantastic. I'm sure it's been incredibly useful for our listeners and for us. So thanks so much for sharing all this. Thanks for writing the books and getting the message out there. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you both for having me, and thanks for what you're doing. I've seen the other side of when retirees aren't prepared, and really even had to do some coaching to their kids who are now executives, and they're dealing with kind of some lost parents, if you will, wandering parents. So I love what you're doing, and thank you for letting me be a part of sharing some content with your audience. So thank you both.
Thanks. And listeners, if you want help in building a transferable business or planning for your exit, you can reach either Pat or me through our websites at grfcpa.com and nslp.com. Until next time on the Exit Readiness podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.